think the COVID, the pandemic, gave us an insight into what homeschooling could look like.
Oh,
90% of the time we have ended up telling the children to follow the passion as a hobby.
okay.
And that hobby can always turn into a profession later on in their life.
Right.
Career has to be always aligned with the child's interest. Children feel that if they want to do something, they have to like it 100%. And they don't accept that 80% of the time they may not like the process.
A lot of parents often question, right? Is my child choosing a career out of fear, comparison, or genuine interest? In your experience, how often is the answer genuine interest?
And there is a lot of influence of social media in career choices nowadays. Message to this entire generation, don't be afraid, being parent is a wonderful job.
Honestly, most people are just scared of the inflation, so inflation is gonna come back.
We have connected with today's guest on Entrepreneurs Arc, a curated and active community of founders, investors, and ecosystem enablers that have in-person meetups and an online community to help each other in building something. Join this buzzy community for free by clicking the link in the description.
Hi everyone. Today we are accompanied by Mrs. Smita Vikhankar and her daughter Ankita Vikhankar. They are building together Yarn Solutions for the past 7 years, which is a student counseling and career guidance firm which helps families with teenage kids. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you, Kshitij.
So, how are you doing today? Let's just start small.
Oh, we are doing great, and thanks for inviting to this podcast. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. All right, so let's just jump into it, right? So, you have spent years inside thousands of family conversations. Mainly, they are all centered around career, right? So, are Indian parents still chasing the become an engineer or doctor dream?
Things are changing.
Okay.
We do see a lot of parents coming with open minds. The fact that they're getting their students to talk to us shows that they're opening up.
Okay.
But yes, in pockets we do find parents obsessed with stable careers, obsessed with engineering and medical careers where they think that children will thrive and be stable. But in effect, I do see a lot of changes already happening.
That's good, right? Because India already produces like some 15 lakh engineers every year. A lot of them are unemployed, some are miserable, they are not really happy working in the jobs that they have, right? So is it fair to sort of create more of these guys without sort of their consent in such a way, just by pressurizing?
I wouldn't say it's good to create any career through pressurizing, be it engineering or medicine or any other. Career has to be always aligned with the child's interest, his potential, what does he enjoy. So it has to be aligned with that. And for that matter, engineering, I do agree in some parts is becoming a little stagnant because it came more about through, this is a money-making career, you know. Irrespective of whether the child was really skilled in that or not. But again, as I said earlier, things are changing. Children themselves are realizing the insecurities involved in an engineering career. So yes, things are changing there. Yes.
That's a good sign actually, because I've always been worried about the trends that we have seen growing up. But it's a good thing that they're changing.
Yes.
But now there is a new problem, right? Because AI is coming into industries.
Yeah.
So some researchers are predicting that around 40% of all jobs will be automated in 15 years. I don't entirely believe in it, but with this kind of news environment going around, like when you sit with a 14-year-old kid and their parents, how does this entire narrative change the way you are talking to them, and how does it change their questions?
So first step is to acknowledge that AI is here to stay. We have to accept that.
Yeah.
But does that really kill all the jobs? No.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's going to generate new jobs, new roles, and that's where we need to align the children's interests, figure out what they're good at, and I think this also opens up a lot of careers in the humanities field.
Achha.
Because creativity is something that is always going to need.
True.
Where we need empathy, where we need to connect with people, socializing. These are the skills where AI cannot get into.
Got it.
And I think humanities will get the respect that it was always due, right?
It's been a while that humans have been human.
Correct.
Right, absolutely. And what I've seen is that even if AI is gonna do say 60-70% of the job, you still have to review all the bad work that comes out of AI. You have to add your inputs, and honestly, you still have to personalize it to your context, no matter what prompts you have given to the LLM. So I do feel I sort of agree with you in that sense. And plus, humanities, I think AI is very far from it, rather the opposite of it.
Correct.
So a lot of parents often question, right? Is my child choosing a career out of fear, comparison, or genuine interest? In your experience, how often is the answer genuine interest?
Very rarely. Kids come with a lot of peer pressure nowadays.
Okay.
There is a lot of social media influence. Recently, we have seen a lot of quick money aspects in children, and that's where we need to counsel them.
Okay.
Because unless it is aligned with their interests, the sustainability of their career can become questionable.
Right.
A lot of times there is parental pressure as well.
Right.
Parents come with a feeling of, I couldn't do this,
Right.
so my child should achieve this dream, you know.
Absolutely.
So it's a mix of peer pressure, social media pressure, parental pressure.
But anything but genuine interest.
Yes.
What percentage of kids do you think come with genuine interest, just so we know?
Maybe 10-15, we do have some kids as examples where they were completely focused on this is of my interest and this is what I want to do. And mainly I've seen with sports. Their genuine interest is in sports, and that's where they want to make a career in.
So that's good and bad, right? Because sports is famously extremely difficult,
Yes.
mainly because the success rate is like less than, I think, 1% or less than 0.1% or something.
Yes, with the competition and population that we have, yes.
And I think genuine interest also keeps changing these days very, very often. And the genuine interest, if it is really genuine, it finds its way out some
Right.
way or the other.
Got it.
So
I think exposure has helped a lot.
Yeah.
Because back in our days, I mean, I know I'm not very old, but we didn't have social media till we were in our, I think, 11th or 12th grade, and even then it was very primitive. But now, because of the way short form content exists,
Exactly.
at least kids are getting exposed, or there is a potential, I would say. It's not that they are genuinely getting exposed to a lot of careers, but there is a slight potential that if there is a inquisitive kid who is proactively looking for different careers, social media, I think, might be slightly helpful in that way, or even YouTube and other sources.
Yeah, it's good for exploring things, but not zeroing down on what the child is truly interested in.
Got it.
Right? So yeah, exploration is fine, okay, but then am I really good at it? Am
Right.
I truly interested in that? And that can come only after having some experience, trying out a few things, you know. Only then
Absolutely.
you'll get to know whether you're truly interested in that.
That's very true. Because many a times you might like an industry from far away.
Correct.
Right? People like movies, but when they get on the sets, they realize how chaotic it is.
Yes.
Right? So it's crazy. Like everyone is shouting at the top of their lungs, nothing is getting done, and somehow you see the magic later on. But when you're in the grunt, the timings are bad.
Correct.
yeah, they don't enjoy the process at all.
Exactly. So unless you are really committed about it, you love the art and the process,
Yeah.
you have to get into it.
Yeah. So,
So-
there is also an example of children feel that if they want to do something, they have to like it 100%.
Right.
Okay, and they don't accept that 80% of the time they may not like the process, they may not like some of the people surrounding it, you know, some of the aspects of that career.
Yeah.
But to get that career, you have to accept that 80% or 30% of what you don't like. You know? So
Absolutely.
sometimes we do feel there has to be acceptance of if I want to achieve something that I like,
Yeah.
it will come with its own
Challenges.
you know.
Absolutely, because it's not going to be always entertaining, right? Every job has its own grunt work
Correct.
baked into it.
Yes.
And you have to grind through it. I don't think there's much of an option.
Absolutely.
So, the world of movies, people liking movies, which sort of makes me feel, is the whole follow your passion narrative something only rich people have the privilege for? What do you think?
No, not necessarily. I think follow your passion becomes true for people or applicable to people who really have that perseverance to take it through.
Okay.
Okay, I have an example of a colleague who worked with me and was working with me in the IT industry, and he had this passion for making movies and acting in movies.
Okay.
Okay, and it took him 11 years to get to a national award, and he doesn't necessarily come through this privileged background. So taking your passion through really needs that hard work and perseverance. It doesn't have to do anything with the background that you come from.
But when you're starting out, okay, let's say you're a middle class family, following your passion would also mean getting trained in certain skills, getting certain degrees, and that may not always be financially viable. Maybe some careers require a lot of longer apprenticeships,
Yes.
right? So in that context, I would just want to ask, as far as teenagers are concerned, is following a passion something that is restrictive for them, or are there other ways of looking at building a career?
Okay, so I would like to answer this question. When we talk about career, it's not only passion.
Okay.
Okay, it has to be the potential of the child. It has to be the potential of the family to support that passion.
Right.
Okay, because maybe sooner or later the child will achieve the passion, but to start with, maybe he'll have to do some odd jobs. Maybe they'll have to take up a career where for his bread and butter comes first,
Right.
So in our counseling, we always look at what is the child good at,
Right.
what is the need of the child at this time, the family as such. It has to be, whenever we counsel, it has to be realistic.
Right.
Okay, for example, if a family cannot support a child's dream of going abroad and studying, we have to take that into account.
Right.
Help the children and the family understand what it takes to go out and study, right? So I think it has to be a win-win situation where the interest, the skills, the need of that time and everything comes together. And passions can, in fact, there are probably 90% of the time we have ended up telling the children to follow the passion as a hobby, if possible.
Okay.
And that hobby can always turn into a profession later on in their life.
Right. Right. I think I have seen a heavy downfall in the hobbies section nowadays. Like, is that what you guys see?
Yes and no. I think it is selective because especially academically good children, right, they are forced into getting in these tuitions and coaching classes, and absolutely the children don't have time for playing, they don't have time to go and pursue some other extracurricular activities. So in those sectors we do see children getting into that grind, and then hobbies die naturally. But we make it a point to help parents understand the importance of taking hobbies in their routine,
Right.
because that keeps the children charged.
Correct.
And also focus back into studies. The hobbies are very, very important. Yes.
So, what is the role of natural inclination in any field in a successful potential career?
It's very important because wherever you're naturally inclined, you tend to do that job better. You tend to learn those faculties faster. You have the probability of excelling in that faculty better, right? So your natural inclination and knowing and discovering that inclination, I think, is very, very important.
Are there ways where parents or teenagers can right now do something in a certain framework to find that out for themselves?
Yes, of course, we are. I think this generation is very fortunate. There are a lot of world-class psychometric assessments and personality assessments that are available that can be utilized to know your strengths, your weaknesses, what are your superpowers that you're born with. So yes, you can discover your interests and inclinations as well. I think this.
Is there anything that parents and teenagers can do right now sitting at home to find out their natural inclinations or strengths?
Yeah, so there are a lot of online free assessments available, like the 16 profiles.
Okay.
There is a free assessment, then there is Big 5 assessment.
Okay.
These come free. So I am going to add that please take the reports with a pinch of salt.
Okay.
Because anything that comes for free will have its limitations.
Right.
But it's a good insight into finding out something about yourself, or getting into insight how do assessments work. Of course, these are tools. One should understand the psychometric assessments are tools and they have to be used as tools and not something written in stone. You need qualified counselors to interpret those assessments and help you understand those assessments.
Got it. It's a good starting point.
Good starting point, I would say. Yes.
But I think kids these days are also using a lot of social media, the courses, anything available online to learn, whether it is art, whether it is language, anything. So they watch videos and they do everything by themselves. So I think eventually you'll find a child sitting for hours together and just drawing something, your child is a designer already, who's so good at it. So you just empower him more.
Right.
And he or she will excel in that.
That makes sense. And for that, I think parents also have to be a little attentive. But more importantly, like you said earlier, kids also need to be left on their own. If you're going to cram up their schedules, I don't know how is it possible for anyone to do anything. Like for the kid to find themselves, they have to have nothing to do for a while.
Absolutely. Doing nothing is a skill. So let the kids get bored for some time. They'll figure out what to do, So we just don't allow that freedom to the children. Like you said, they are crammed with so many tuitions and coaching classes. I remember back in our days, we had so much of free time, we were unless we were bad at some subject, we never went to any tuition class, right? And nowadays, even if the child is the brightest, he's attending tuition classes. So I think, yes, the child needs to be given some freedom.
In fact, nowadays, people are taking additional tuitions, like your 9th standard tuitions are going on. You finish that, you go to school, you finish that, and afterwards, you again go for your IIT entrance exam tuitions additionally. Because
and then there are in-person tutors coming home and teaching the child again.
I mean, what is the whole point of school then? If you're learning the same thing and then relearning it again from another teacher when there is conflict, the student is already tired to learn anything new.
And because this sort of brings an interesting part of homeschooling, right? Because I've always felt that if a school exists and your kid is going there and you still feel the need to send him or her to classes, would you rather not send the kid to school? Like, how does homeschooling look for you guys?
In the last 2-3 years, I've seen it really growing. A lot of kids who have passed through NIAS, that is National Indian Open Schooling System, they come to us and parents are opening up. So there is a huge network of NIAS parents. Earlier I was a little apprehensive about open schooling system because I felt the children are missing out on the going and playing social aspect, playing in the school, the ground, and mixing with children. But I think the parents are complementing it with putting children in the hobby classes, getting them on the ground, and I think parents have learned how to make it work for the children. It's picking up very well.
Makes sense, right? Because I would only assume that if a kid is not going to go to the school for, let's say, 4 hours plus traveling for 1 hour, so that's like 5-6 odd hours in total, and the kid is already going to go to tuitions. So the kid is going to meet other kids of their own age anyway. They are going to do all the fun stuff that they can do. Plus the 6 hours are free for them to go and maybe play football or something in a professional setting, like in a trained manner, which again is going to help them. So it made sense, but it's really growing.
It's growing. It is growing.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, but please. I think the pandemic gave us an insight into what homeschooling could look like. Right. So since then, it has really given people a chance to try it out and the will also to do it more because, they could focus more on what the child likes or how much time they can give. I'm not sure how feasible it is for working parents, to be honest, because it's very, very time consuming for parents. I wouldn't be able to do it, how much ever I want to. But the ones who can should really try to. I mean, India is still navigating through the resources available for the child for homeschooling and even classes or coaching or, like you said, expertise. We are still navigating through that. We still have to find something really close by, which is that level where the child can actually excel in it. So it is growing, I agree.
It is growing, and wherever I have seen those examples, yes, I agree, one of the parents had to be available to make it work for the family. So,
but is it really compulsory? Like, for example, let's say homeschooling doesn't mean no tuitions, right? So if tuitions are happening, does the parent still need to be home to homeschool someone?
At least when the children are younger, somebody needs to be monitoring, observing, and if you don't have support system,
Okay.
which in nuclear families we do see they don't have a support system, right? So somebody needs to be there to guide the child on what tuitions to attend, what courses to take.
Right. So it's like a complete parental control on the input of the child.
Right.
Right. So you are choosing, like the child tells you, but you are gathering the resources, you are figuring out the classes, you're probably dropping the child there, or ordering stuff, maybe using some brands to get stuff for you to complete worksheets, etc. So it's a lot of work.
Got it.
So you
Got it.
not home as such, but it's very time consuming for sure.
If you like our deep conversations, please feel free to subscribe and hit that bell icon. Also, share this conversation with someone you think will find it useful or interesting. This way they will know how much you care about them. Back to the video.
I've heard from you that a lot of kids want to become YouTuber influencers for the easy money aspect.
Yes.
Tell us about it a little bit.
Yeah, so there were some children who came to us like 9th and 10th standard, and like, okay, naturally we open up and we say, okay, what questions do you have? And they say, ma'am, can you suggest a career where I can start earning 1 lakh a month?
Okay.
Okay, and then we say, okay, it took me like probably 15 years to get there. So, but yes, and this comes from the influence of social media. People see the influencers making lakhs and all that is popularized, but children fail to understand the hard work that has gone behind coming to that point, or the 99% failures that are there, So, and that is a realistic picture we have to share with them.
Right.
But yes, children bring up this crazy stuff to us. And there is a lot of influence of social media in career choices nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, survivorship bias plays an important role here, right? Because you will always see the successful
Correct.
0.1% and assume that everyone who takes that path becomes successful, which is not really the case.
Yes.
So, and plus the part about you mentioning that kids saying that I need 1 lakh per month.
Yeah.
I mean, is it just exposure or inflation is catching up to kids also now?
Okay, let's not talk about inflation. It will get political. Yes, I think it's more of influence also. With the expenses rising, I want to achieve this, I want to buy clothes, the world is getting materialistic, right? And somewhere probably they hear, oh, you need 1 lakh to survive in this world. So this 1 lakh figure has probably come from there.
They've heard it from their parents probably.
Parents, right? You have to make at least that much to really have a good life. So I think that's where it's coming from. It's a mix of inflation and influence, I would say.
Can you name a career that shows up most consistently as a perfect fit in your psychometric results, but Indian parents almost always ignore it?
So the psychometric tests that we have are actually mapped with the individual's interests, aptitudes, and motivations that the child has. So the reports are definitely very unique. However, we do see designing coming up as a little general suggestion for children, because design is not a specific career. You can do designing in architecture, you can do designing in engineering, you can have UI designing, right? So designing does show up. Sometimes it's questioned by parents or rejected because they are unaware of this career, right? Okay. Typically in our Indian scenario, designing means drawing. Only if you are good at drawing, then you can be good at designing. But there are so many more aspects there, right? Even in media, you need so much of designing. Yeah. So I think it's because of lack of awareness that parents tend to ignore designing as a career, but it's showing up a lot in our assessments. Yes.
Okay. And I think it's a very interesting thing, because I come sort of, again, I have interest in design, but I don't really have the formal education for it. But even like you said, I see design everywhere, right? Web designing is also design, interiors is also design, architecture is also design, art design is different, sculptures, those designs are different, engineering design is different, and even in IT, because you come from there, you have seen solution architecture.
Correct.
Which needs a little bit of design ingenuity to create workflows and stuff, right? Because, and I know design and workflow doesn't go together, but
no, they do go work together. Yes, yeah.
So, what do you wish would happen that people get to know about these things a little more?
I think we spoke about hobbies. This is where children can take up some hobbies, get exposure into different activities. So we were just talking about earlier in our days we had this Shramadan, where people go and work for some in other houses. They do some work. It could be voluntary, it could be paid work, but get that exposure. Okay, once you get that exposure, then you understand. You would understand end-to-end workflows of that work.
Right.
So, and then you get to know what design is required, what is planning, what is time management, and then you understand what are you good at.
Got it.
What do you enjoy most?
Right.
So I think bringing those things back, and I think we are hitting that again and again. Don't cramp the children's schedule so much that they're not able to try anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges for parents, because I think parents, that is the only way that they have seen work for them. And the assumption is always that if it's work for me, why is it not good enough for you? So,
Right. I think what you said, building on the workflow at a younger age could add more, right? Like if they
Correct.
start interning with parents or anybody else, like,
Correct.
they can just start. And I think some schools are offering that as well.
Acha.
Like probably for 7 years old, you can work there for at the baking, you just go and serve people for a day. It's a good internship program for the
Absolutely.
kids. And it has begun. And I think that would add a lot of value.
Correct. And that also brings to me something that we were discussing last week, somewhere we have lost the dignity of work aspect. Parents themselves have started treating work, something is derogatory and something is not good.
labor is looked down upon.
Labor is looked down upon, and I think we need to bring that back in our society, And that's the reason I mentioned Shramadan. We have to get dignity of work back in our culture.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think there needs to be a major differentiator between dignity of labor and being worried about free labor being misused. Because sometimes, just because the labor is free for someone doesn't mean that it is not doing you any good. You have to look at what benefits you're getting. Just monetary part may not be it. There are other aspects to what you get in return for your labor.
Correct.
So that, I think, is an additional context which is sort of missing.
Yeah, you're learning something, you're learning a new skill. Social skills are so important, right? So you get to talk to strangers.
True.
And that brings so much of new skills in you. So I think these are all hidden benefits. Yes.
Absolutely. And obviously, there is network expansion, right? Upfront, you get to meet a lot of people. You never know. You are maybe meeting your next business partner, your life partner, your next boss, your next assistant, whoever.
Absolutely.
But unless you step out and do something,
Correct.
that's not happening.
Correct.
So, with that in mind, is it right for a parent to keep telling their child, I sacrificed my dreams for you, now it's your job, do this and become better, something like that? I'm sure you must have seen this in sessions, right? So, is there like a psychological name for this kind of parental behavior?
I think it is emotional blackmail. Yeah, in Indian, probably it happens elsewhere also, but parents tend to say, I'm working so hard for you, I'm slogging just to provide these things to you. But this definitely causes a lot of pressure on the child's psychology. They tend to kill their dreams eventually,
Right.
if pressurized more often
A lot,
again and
yes.
again, this is like mere bacche mera badla lenge and all that stuff are coming from the movies, right? But yes, it is definitely causing a pressure on the child's psyche, and we should, as parents, I would definitely suggest parents to take a pause before you utter any such sentences for the children. Of course, you have to help them realize the hard work that you're doing for them, but it can come differently.
Absolutely, right? So, at what point does it cross the line, so to speak? On one side, you are just letting them know, sort of setting context, and on the other side, you are essentially blackmailing or harassing them. So, is there a sort of point or limit to this?
Yeah, the moment you see your child is shutting down on you, okay, or the child is becoming so rebellious that they are not caring what you're saying, right? And you're talking to walls rather than your child, you have hit a point where it's not going anywhere, right? So either it's harming the child or it's just not helping the child.
Right.
So I think that's the point you have to identify, and I think you should identify it even before it hits that
Ideally,
point.
yes.
Yes. Right.
And because parents are sort of obsessed with, obviously, their own life, their own failures, they also tend to fixate on the careers that they wanted to take up and couldn't. Maybe there were financial reasons, medical reasons, logistical reasons. Because of this fixation, are there any particular careers that parents are entirely ignoring, like any particular paths?
I've seen a few examples, especially mothers who have been in IT for some years, and sudden there is panic, jobs are going in IT. I couldn't get back into IT after taking a sabbatical, after taking a maternity leave, going back home, and I couldn't find the right placement. I don't want my daughter getting there.
Okay.
So such things do happen. So mothers are typically shutting down IT careers or 9-to-5 jobs for their daughters because they feel they may not survive those jobs for longer, or they'll fall back once they get into maintaining family or getting into that work-life balance. So, but the child must be very good in that aspect, right? Some kids are good in computer science, so
yes.
I think they should, they have the potential, so they should get into those jobs. So I wouldn't point to one particular career as such, but then I think parents' past experiences do come in picture like this, where they stop children taking those careers again.
And I find it particularly ironic when it comes to IT, because IT is one of the few fields, because I also come from there, it is one of the very few fields that actually empowers you to work remotely, work for almost anyone across the world, and even if you're not literally able to move yourself outside of the house, you can still actually continue having a good enough career on your terms. So I'm very surprised to hear that people from that background are feeling this way.
This comes from the fear of starting on your own.
Oh.
Okay, anything that doesn't give you a monthly paycheck. Okay, so in Indian context, we still fear enterprises, we still fear freelancing. If you're not going to get a certain amount every month, how do you run your household?
Yes.
So that fear is still there. Thankfully, there has been some generation who are able to give that liberty to the children, that you have house, don't worry about the food, and you can try things. But there is still a large population who cannot afford to experiment.
To add to that point where we were talking about, parents deciding, if a parent is a doctor, the parent has seen the career go, rise, what happens to a doctor's career at the end of, 60 years.
Right.
So the parent either says you will be a doctor or you will not be a doctor.
Right.
The parent does not have a choice of what the child can do, no awareness of other careers.
Got it.
The same thing happens for any other career as well. So like, for example, a teacher would say, yeah, there's no growth here, so you don't be a teacher now, do something else. But why? Like probably the child might be very good at teaching.
Correct.
So parents come with their own perspective and a very
binary fixation based on their own experience.
Right, so either this or not that at all.
Right.
I have seen this a lot while talking to parents.
True.
And I think it's only human. We sort of have to, just because they're parents doesn't mean they're not humans, right? Even every child is gonna probably eventually going to become a parent. So I think it is only human for people to feel this way. But as parents, because you have a child responsibility, you have to sort of reel back and re-examine your own biases and then say, okay, boss, you decide what you want to do.
Yes.
So, a 2024 study found that 40% of Indian teenagers report stress and anxiety as their primary daily experience. Who do you hold more responsible for this situation? Like parents, teachers, or the teenagers, kids themselves, or their peers, or society as a whole?
I think the society as a whole, because we are responsible for introducing the social media to the children. We are responsible for inflation. We are responsible for not giving that work-life balance to parents so that they can equally take care of the children. So I think as a system, we have come together to this situation. where so many younger children have started reporting. Probably these words were not even existing in our society: anxiety and depression, and I'm feeling so low. And the age group has started coming even lower and lower, right? Earlier 30-year would say I'm anxious, it was okay. But now you're 12-year-old coming and saying I'm facing depression. And I think as a system and society, we failed them.
And what do you think needs to change in the long term? It's a loaded question, I know, but...
Giving more time to the children, being available for their questions, being available for them emotionally, and in the system and schools also introducing systems where we are listening to them. I loved the ban that Australia put for
social media
ban for below 16-year-olds. I think something like that, if we can introduce it, will be wonderful. We do have a system where we have counselors in schools now, but that just being instead of a tick mark, if we could have real qualified counselors who are listening to the children, will help. And collectively as a society, we accept this as a challenge, acknowledge it as a challenge, and actively and proactively start looking at it and handling it would really help.
Absolutely. And this is sort of the long term, right?
Yes.
What can be changed today in homes and classrooms right now?
In classrooms, I think introduce maybe 30-minute class every day to listen to the children.
Okay.
And in homes, bedtime could be a time where parents sit with the children and understand what their day has been like. Siblings sit together, have fun. They could have fights, but at least they talk to each other rather than looking at phones. You take your children to your relatives' homes, start visiting your aunts, uncles, that system helps so much.
Right.
So I think getting back to that system, spending more time together, physically, in person, socializing, these are the immediate things we can start doing. When I did my, I'm just taking the topic to emotional intelligence certification that I did, and it was a complete eye-opener for me and something that I felt we had never addressed this issue in our Indian context, There is so much of suppressed emotions, we are not aware of what's happening to us. And bringing that awareness to our children, helping them understand their emotions, expressing themselves, is something that we can do right away.
Absolutely. So if you can give one message to the parents watching, the one thing that they should do tonight is?
Sit with their children, talk to them, listen to them. And I would say that parents need to start understanding their own emotions. We are not born parents, right? You also become parents. You are
Right.
evolving as a parent. So be kind to yourself.
Right.
And as parent also, you will face so many different emotions. So bringing that awareness to yourself is also very, very important. So, and then bring that back to your children as well.
And I personally have felt that parents, as time goes, as life happens, somehow forget that they were not born at the age of 30. They were born at the age of 0. They were babies, toddlers, kids, teenagers themselves. They love reminiscing about those times, but forget that their own blood is a reflection of those times.
Yes.
And instead of telling themselves, let me give you what I didn't get, they recontextualize it in the way, oh, you're getting something already that I didn't have and you better have the value. Whereas the kid doesn't have the context of what you did or didn't have.
Oh yeah, so like sometimes in my days back when I had younger kids, my kids were younger, and I used to tell them, see, this is what I did, and they used to say, don't repeat that to us. We'll have our own life, we'll have our own struggles, okay? And that's true for every parent, right? There's no point in going back and telling the children, because they are going to have their own struggles.
Right.
Right, so yeah, I agree with you, there's no...
I just wish that parents really understood that is the same with housing societies trying to bully all the bachelors. As if these guys were always born married. As if they never were bachelors, they never were looking for jobs, they never faced the challenges of, going for an internship, then building a life out of it.
Correct. Yeah, a lot of societies do have a placard now, right? Bachelors won't be allowed.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, then what were you doing? Like, you weren't on the streets, right?
Okay.
So I think as a society, it would help if we are a little kinder to everyone, or at least the past reflection of your own journeys. And
Yeah, I would say let's start being kinder to ourselves first. The moment we start doing that, we empathize with others as well. So yes, start with yourself and then extend it to your family and the society.
slowly roll that feature out.
Yes.
Uh, you have sat in rooms where parents describe their child as, lazy, unfocused, not serious. But after doing assessments, have you actually found these children to be any of these things, or was there a different way to look at things?
Sometimes the parents are correct. So their reading of their children being lazy or not motivated is right. Sometimes it's not. It depends. Okay. Sometimes the parents are not reading their children correctly, and sometimes they are. But many times parents know their children the best, right? So yes, it's a mix of what we read through the test or after talking to them. Many times the parents are right, and we have to handle that.
So if you could teach the parents right now how to do an objective test of this, like I have an assumption about my kid. Okay, now I'm coming from my biases, and maybe I'm just frustrated because of our relationship having reached a bad point. From there, if I still am sane-minded and I want to make an objective assessment of whether the kid is lazy or not, are there things that parents can do at home right now to do that?
They can start with listening to them, talking to them, giving them small activities that they can really do in realistic time,
Okay.
and start gauging for themselves whether he's really lazy or you're telling them something that they can not really do.
Okay.
Okay. Sometimes parents might just put such a load on them that the children get frozen because they cannot do those activities. But start with smaller ones which the children can actually do.
Any examples of?
For example, fetching a glass of water.
Okay.
Okay. Or you go somewhere and you ask the child to go and collect some grocery from a shop. So is the child actually lazy or not? Or is he scared to get to a shop? So you'll get to know those things. If he's lazy, and then understand why he doesn't want to go.
Right.
Okay, so you'll get to know whether he's really lazy or scared to get to the shop. So such small things you can do, or you can take some assessments and figure out what is he really going through.
Specifically for these words like lazy, unfocused, not serious, is there sort of the other side of a coin, so to speak? So, for example, lazy is your perspective, but the reality is maybe they are just scared.
Correct.
Unserious from your perspective means callous, but from their perspective probably means uninterested. So like this, can you give like a framework for bad emotions that parents are assuming, but the reality could be the other side?
It could be. Like I give you an example of being scared. Okay. For example, my nephew is scared to get to a shop. So while going to the shop, maybe a dog bit him, or he was alone, bullied by some child, and then he doesn't want to take that path anytime, right? And that's the reason, but he's scared to tell that to his mom.
Okay.
Right. So here the emotion of fear is being camouflaged as laziness.
Right.
And there could be any such example. So like you said, you want the child to say, draw something. And you say, I don't want to do it. Or maybe solve maths puzzles. And you say he's not serious about his studies, but he's not interested in maths. Right? And I think for this, being available for the child to really read through what he really wants, having those conversations is important.
Absolutely. Are Indian parents actually the number one reason that their children are failing to develop emotional resilience?
In parts, yes. as a society, we have started getting to be a little well-to-do. And because of that, we don't want our children to struggle. We want to provide as much as possible to them. We didn't have these things back in our days, so we
Right.
want to provide it to our children. But through that, things are getting easier
Okay.
for children, some parts of it, right? And that's the reason why children are don't know how to fail.
Okay.
Everything comes so easy, right? And that is the reason why I think resilience is falling short. They don't know how to bounce back because everything just came on the platter, right? And I think that's where we are failing as parents. We have to make them work hard, help them understand the importance of working hard, and bounce back. Yeah.
And what happens when one day a child just comes at home and just says, I hate school, and storms out of the room. So what can parents say or do to not make this situation worse?
Understand the cause behind the hatred. Understand why the child doesn't want to go to school, rather than many times we are so occupied with our own stuff, we said, oh, you're just like that. Okay, or we just label the child with something, and then of course after labeling the child will probably rebel and shut the door on you. It's important at that point to help the child acknowledge that hatred emotion. You also acknowledge it, understand, to get deeper and understand the reason behind that hatred emotion. And then once you get there, then you understand, okay, let's handle this.
Right.
Okay, so at that time reacting with equal hatred is not going to help, right? Yeah.
So the first thing to do is not react.
Not react.
Let it flow a little bit,
Yes,
and then get back to the child and just calmly ask, "Ki boss,
absolutely.
set me up, tell me
Correct.
what's up."
Yes. So any emotion, right, it has a life
Okay.
of say 60 seconds, 90 seconds. If you feed that emotion with your thoughts, with your actions, with your reactions, it's going to grow.
Right.
It's important to give that emotion its life and let it die.
Got it.
And the moment it dies, then distract it, you talk something else, you calm it down, it will automatically die.
So this time of emotion that you mentioned, is it a scientific thing or is it more of a thumb rule that you have observed?
No. So if you go through Daniel Goleman, who is the father of emotional intelligence, a lot of research is around that. Typically an emotion lives for 60 to 90 seconds is a scientific research.
That's it?
Yes.
So what you're saying is, if you feel anything, whatever, like happy, sad, angry, frustrated, whatever, if you give yourself 60 to 90 seconds, if you give that time to yourself, you can actually see the other side without flowing.
Yes.
So the whole thing about we have seen in movies and cartoons and series where someone gets angry and they just count to 10 or something like that.
Yes.
So is it like instead count to 30 or 90 and that would really do the trick?
Yeah, so maybe a countdown to 1 to 100 was there, right? I remember my mom always telling me, start counting 1 to 100 and everything will just go off, right? So I think that also had a scientific base, So yeah, it's very valid.
That's very interesting. I wish a lot of people, myself included, would do that. I think I'll have to start now.
It's easier said than done.
That it is, I understand.
Yes.
Because I feel I've sort of seen this in a way where I didn't know the exact science behind it or something, but I have observed again anecdotally that sometimes if I'm just quiet, it helps.
Yes.
Just be quiet, nothing. I don't even think or engage or something. Just because of the virtue of me being quiet, I have come to a better way of handling the situation.
Yes. So in our brain, we have a amygdala, which is the organ of survival.
Okay.
Okay. It gets triggered.
Okay.
The moment you regulate your hypothalamus, provided oxygen, provided different thoughts, these are the inputs of the hypothalamus.
Absolutely.
And then it will regulate the amygdala.
Okay.
And things start getting regulated.
With a toddler in life, you have to do that like 50 times a day.
That's the challenge we
So
have
I've
taken.
probably counted like 1,000, 5,000 throughout the day.
So either prepare for that.
Yeah. So from patient, like absolutely impatient person to an absolutely patient person here.
Or a patient.
Yeah.
But then that's the joy of being a parent, right? I don't know, I may be digressing here. I am myself a parent. I have a child sitting here who's a grown-up parent now. She has a toddler, but with all the challenges that kids get in our life, it's still worth it. So I want to pass on a message to this entire generation. Don't be afraid. Being parent is a wonderful joy.
Honestly, most people are just scared of the inflation. So inflation is going to come back.
You included, Kshitij.
Absolutely. Everyone is scared of inflation.
No, I had included you for the message.
I mean, so, I've seen a lot of kids sort of grow up and become problematic a little later, a little troubled, I would say, not problematic to society as such. So, with that context, can you give me one sign that a teenager is approaching any kind of emotional breakdown that most parents generally tend to dismiss as, teenage drama or just them being hormonal or something like that?
Yeah, so sometimes they might start shutting down. Suddenly they've stopped talking at home, started going out too much. They're not spending time at home at all, or probably spending too much time alone by themselves, locking up in rooms, doing repetitive things again and again. I've seen children watching the same reel, how many, maybe 1,000 times. So I don't think they're watching the reel, they're just lost in their thoughts, right? So I think these are the signs where they're probably deep into some overthinking or some emotional burnout, some trauma, and that might need attention. In our counseling, when we counsel, we do observe such signs. For example, there was one child, irrespective of what we were talking to the child, she would always go back to her paintings that were hung in the wall. This is something that I drew. And she would fetch one or other sketch, another sketch, another sketch. And she was not interested in what careers we are discussing with her. She was not interested in listening to that. She would always bring a new drawing and show to us. And we figured out she needed help.
Okay.
So these are some signs you should start looking for. And maybe such children do need therapies. They might need some clinical psychologist help.
Got it.
So as parents, I think we should be observant of these symptoms.
Got it.
So the conversation is so interesting that we sort of extended our time. We overshot our time by a lot, but we were so happy to do it that we are probably going to cut this into 2 parts. So if you are at the end of part 1, please be rest assured we are still editing the rest of the video, and next week you will come back for the second part of this conversation.